Hello and welcome. I'm Humphrey Hawksley, and for the next hour on Goldster Inside Story, we are going to go on an incredible journey into our stuff, what we collect and choose to keep, or rather do not throw away or pass on, the clutter, the memories, an old bus pass, a theatre ticket from long ago, seashells, bangles, and see here, I even got one. Why on earth have I got this old Mercedes thing from an old car that I loved? Because I can't bear to throw it away. Familiarity, history, memories, relationship, roads taken and roads not taken. The average household has, and I love this statistic, 300,000 items. Yep, not this fake Goldster background, but if I dared to strip it away, you would see my chaotic clutter. But our brilliant guest today doesn't stop there. Not only is she an expert analyst on stuff and clutter, she is an author, an editor, a publishing guru who was telling us about Kindle and ebooks before Kindle was invented and ebooks even knew they were going to ever come around. She is also, yes, there's a third thing here and many more. She is also a highly talented artist, giving us the most beautiful illustrations for the few of her books we're talking about: The Stuff of Life, A Life in 490 Recipes, where she matches food to relationships, and the Egg and Card book, which is a diary, egg for spring, cards for winter, and a lot else. With elegant energy and no apologies, my guest scatters her friends and family across the pages of her beautiful creativity. So welcome the fabulous Jane Dorner to Goldster Inside Story.
Hello.
Hi, Jane. Now, I've got to ask you this as the first thing, because, you know, we all have our 300,000 things in our house. What is the most useless thing that you keep and can't throw away?
Well, I've got so many useless things that I can't really think. But when I turned around and looked at my shelf behind me, I came across this sugar mouse. And I thought, what on earth am I keeping that for? And behind it was an ashtray, and I don't even smoke. But my parents had this, and it's Art Deco. And I've kept this because the cat, I obviously like cats and mice. And the cat is on the weather vane of my folly now in this position. So that's pretty useless.
So the mouse and the cat. Now, if anybody has got any stories or thoughts or questions about the stuff of life, what they collect, how that relates to family, friends, anything you want to put it in the chat, and Jane and I will discuss it, because that's a Goldster rule. Now, oh, and I just wanted to show you this as you were doing that. I got this off my desk. Now, why on earth? And what on earth is this? Did you ever have one of the, you just throw things into it for 10 years and this is what comes out?
Yeah.
And what's the most meaningful thing that you
well, again, there's an allusion here between the most useless and the most meaningful, which is this. It's a little grasshopper. Don't know.
Yes, we can see that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's the first present my husband gave me when we'd only met each other for a week. Oh. And I've still got it. That's 43 years ago or some such. And I think it's meaningful, but so is everything else. And for instance,
so tell me we all keep things. I've got this thing here. This is a very cheap touristy thing of Lenin that was given to me when some Russian spy tried to recruit me into the KGB, and I just can't, for the sake of me, throw it away. I mean, it needs to be thrown away. But what is it in our minds that makes us keep something or throw something away?
I think it's emotional. I think it tells the story of your life, the things that you keep, and why you keep them, and whether they form a collection. So have I got a collection of cats and mice? Not necessarily, but I've got more than one, and more than one is already a collection. And yes, you need to remember being recruited for the KGB or not. It's part of life.
Part of life, isn't it? And the plates we're seeing, is that a collection of plates that we're seeing behind you there?
It is a collection. They are variously. In fact, shall I show you my
Yes.
book?
Yes, I was going to say, show us the book, The Stuff of
I can
Life. Yeah.
explain more easily now. I don't know. Can you see the whole of it?
We can see that. Yes.
It's called The Stuff of Life. That's my. On the cover is my self-portrait, and I've chosen one page to show you, which is. I can't see.
Okay. Yes. No, we can see that. Yep.
So these are some of the plates that are behind me. Chinese from the 17th century, the big platters. If I go back, those two big ones at the top, yes. Chinese, and the one next to it is Japanese. The others further along are Delft and also Chinese. And the reason I've painted them in this book is because I've wanted to tell the story of my collection of things, why I've collected, what I think collecting means, and where I got each of these objects and what they are telling me about life, memories, who gave them to me, where I bought it, and what does it all add up to. And one of the things that inspired me to write this book was thinking about the artist Michael Landy, who in 2000 hired, I think he was born in Hollingsworth in Oxford Street, and destroyed his entire worldly possessions, including his passport, his Porsche, all his letters, something like 7,000 and something objects he destroyed. And I thought, I couldn't do that. Let me do this the other way around. Let me build up from the objects I have, whatever they are. And in fact, the very first thing in the book is this little grasshopper, which is a symbol of friendship, as a matter of fact, and see what I can make of my own objects. And by painting them, I discovered that I hadn't even looked at them properly before. So that plate, can you see just above, just there, that plate there? Yeah. I didn't realize that it had a beautiful little grasshopper or cricket on it. So that becomes a slight theme, that you start to notice the things you've got and look at them more carefully.
So sticking just with the plates idea, as you said, one's Chinese, Japanese, and you chose to put them in the book, Stuff of Life. Is that an emotional thing, or do you want to sort of round off a collection, or is it pragmatic? I mean, what would be your main driving force to creating that collection?
Well, the whole house is full of all sorts of collections, not just the ones that I put in my book. And the way I did it was, what did I feel like painting that day? I do watercolors, and then when I had a critical mass of paintings, I arranged them in themes. So ceramics was one theme, books obviously is another, stamps.
And show us in the book, if you can get to the page, your, I don't know, the one that you want to show us most in the book that tells a great story of how you came, why you did it, and how you came about it.
Well, I'm not sure I'm answering your question really, but
it doesn't matter.
This one is little vignettes of some of the pictures that are on my walls.
Okay.
And you know, I collect paintings as well as painting myself, and so I couldn't show all of them, so I just sort of picked a little detail. So I mean, for instance, I mean, not showing off or anything, but that's a tiny bit of a Rembrandt etching. that I have.
So you painted a tiny bit of a Rembrandt to put into the book with
Yes,
the collection of
yes.
staples. Well, I don't know, it's not showing off, but it's quite impressive. And the story, because there's a lot of text there that we can't see, of course, tell us the story that you wrapped around that collection.
Well, again, it was trying to find out in my own mind what being a collector means. And, you know, whether I think some people have got to have everything in a series. So, you know, they've got to have all the Minton jugs that are important and valuable. Some people have to have, it has to be faultless, unchipped, you know, pristine. Sometimes, you know, books very often with the pages uncut or not taken out of the Solander box or whatever it happens to be. And for me, it's not like that. I've got these plates, are very many of them are chipped because that's all I could afford.
You could have sold the Rembrandt by the plates.
Well, the Rembrandt belonged to my mother, and I inherited it from her.
so no selling it or throwing that away.
No, I mean, it's one of many. It's an addition, so it's, you know, it's not hugely valuable, but it's a nice thing to have.
We have a comment from Denise here. I recently threw away my parents' and sons' passports. In my defense, their terrible passport photographs took me down memory lane. That because the passports, actually, I have a whole stack in my cupboard behind me of every passport I've had since I was 15.
Yes, I'm not surprised. And I think throwing them away is perhaps a sort of a statement that it's all right now to outgrow something and move on.
Okay. So and just sort of sticking with this, show us another page of the book with another collection in it and tell us about that.
All right, well, it just I just happened to open it at the book page.
Oh, okay.
So that's.
So you got up in the morning and decided you wanted to paint or illustrate to put.
I did, and also I at one stage in my life I did bookbinding. So the bottom picture there is of various things that I have bound on a bookbinding course. I mean, as this is a program about books, it might be interesting.
Yes, it is.
One of the books that we're going to talk about later on, I did my own binding for as well.
And I want to move on to that in just a second, but I want to try to encapsulate this idea of 300,000 things in our lives and the stages that we go through our life. Because I mean, I think when we were all teenagers, I just had a rucksack and that was all my possessions, and now I've got God knows what. And just give us some thoughts on that, Jane.
Yes, I agree. I think you got that figure possibly from my book, and that was by counting every single kitchen utensil, lavatory roll, toaster, gold coins, everything. And I remember seeing a program where it was a television program where somebody had got the people in a house to take all their things that they owned out into the front of the house to be photographed, and it was an art installation of some kind. And so you got people in villages in various parts of the world who just had a goat, a cooking pot, and a few modest things. And then you got people in the Western world who couldn't even take it all out of their house. There was just too much. And
is there a link between what you possess or what you have and happiness, do you think?
No, I don't. I think it may even be a way of searching for happiness and feeling that you amount to something as a person because you have got self-defining objects in your life that tell other people who you are. And I think that's one of the reasons why you've got all those books behind you, Humphrey, not that they're necessarily yours, but they tell people who come into a room that this is a person who has books and who is educated in some sense.
Yes, that's interesting, because I'm thinking of the travels that I've done, and when you go into a village where people have absolutely nothing, there's a lot more happiness than I might find people walking down Oxford Street or walking down a town centre in Britain, where they've all sort of worried about their status and their rank and their mortgages and the rest of it.
Well, absolutely. And that's why I think Michael Landy decided to burn all his possessions, to sort of, as it were, peel off the onion skins of the personality and say, what do I amount to as the inner?
Oh, that's interesting.
Person, you know, a bit like in Peer Gynt, where he peels away all the layers of the personality.
And this is a great entree into our next stage, because if we peeled away, Jane, all your collections and possessions and everything, we are going to find out who you are and what you are. And but before we do that, take a guess, to our wonderful audience, how many bits of stuff do you have in your house? Do you think you have 300,000, 10,000, a million? Just put it in the chat and let's see if anybody wants to have a go at that. We have some things. Suri says some collections are very valuable, but when children inherit them, they will probably bin them as they don't have time, patience, or room to keep them. What is the best thing to do in such a case? Do you mean, Suri, if you're going to leave them to your children, fearing they're going to bin them? But what do you reckon about that, Jane?
Well, I guess that's why, was one of the reasons why I wrote the book, was so that my children would be able to see why these things were important to me, and to perhaps pause on the threshold before they get house clearance in. But maybe that's what children have to do. Maybe they just, like I said about the passports, maybe they just got to say, okay, she loved it, we don't.
Yes.
Move on.
Move on. Emma says, can you explain to us what goes on in the mind of a hoarder when they collect things? Do they think they are collecting or hoarding? I'm not sure
yes.
the difference between the two. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. I thought about that a lot. There's I think there's a very obvious line. I think you know when you're a hoarder, because you don't throw anything away at all. You keep all newspapers, and people can't move through the room because there's too much, there's literally too much stuff. Whereas I think that in my house, I would say it was a curated collection of things rather than just a mass dumped all over the floor.
So a collector or a hoarder is somebody who does not curate what they own? Possibly. Yes. Shall we'll have a punt with that. If anybody wants to define a hoarder and a collector, let us know. Margaret Angelis says, I don't think I can count that high for as many things as they've got in their life. Now, we're going to go into some of your books and your illustrations a little later in the program, but I want to go over where you started your career, because it was long ago. You published with the top publishers, and you were right across ebooks and all that thing. Tell us about that.
Oh God.
Well, you know, I mean, you must have memories and mementos around.
No, sorry, it was just that my phone is ringing. I'll just ignore it. Yeah, I went into publishing straight from university, and became an editor at Longmans, which doesn't exist anymore, and they published my first book. I've now got my name on the cover of 21 books, and that includes OUP, Bloomsbury, British Library, just recently Hachette, and I decided that really I don't really like being published by regular publishers, because you don't get your own book, you get their book and their compromises, and they're not even that good at selling them. So,
but just before you, what was your first book? What was
the first book was a reader for 9 to 13-year-olds called It was about Cortez and the Aztecs.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, that's and it's a speciality of yours.
Well, I happened to be going on my honeymoon to Mexico, and I
Right.
proposed it to Longmans because I thought I'd do the research out there, not a bit of it. I was on my honeymoon.
Right.
There's no research happening. But I came back and did it on time.
Right, and so that was to a deadline,
Yes,
to
yes,
a contract and a deadline, and
yeah.
you found. And how many years before you realized that you didn't like being published?
Oh, well, this is only very recent that I've gone down the self-publishing route.
So when you did the first one, you were proud and to actually have a book out and everything like that. And
oh yes, you know, as a young thing, seeing your name in print, marvelous. But you know, you get used to it after a while, and you get. Sorry, that sounds terribly arrogant. I didn't mean it like that.
So if anybody thinks Jane is an arrogant person, put it in the chat, because I don't think she is. Carry on.
but and I you know, and then it came. It was more important to me in the end to have to write the book I wanted to write than the book that they wanted me to write. So, you know, one of my first books was on fashion, and they said that the brief was 1700 to the present day, and then just as I was about to finish it, they said, "Oh, actually, we'd like you to start in the Middle Ages." And I had to put a whole chapter at the beginning, which threw the whole book off balance, off kilter.
Right.
And
yes. And as you say, it's not. I mean, yours is one of many books they're doing, and they don't really know any more about what makes it a good book than you do. So I can see where you're. We have Geeta says absolutely not. That's when you apologize for being arrogant. You are not arrogant, and she gives you 3 kisses for that too. Jennifer has an interesting question here. Or comment. I think hoarding can sometimes be linked to anxiety and trauma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you expand on that?
Well, I mean, we could get all Freudian here, couldn't we? And say
we can go Freudian, Jungian, wherever you Goldstering, you can go wherever you want to go.
You could say, you know, a lack of love in childhood makes you need to keep things close to the chest, and you know, these objects of desire become substitutes for love that you need elsewhere in your life. I mean, that's just sort of one possible idea.
I like that idea because I understand it.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So that if you have a distant childhood and not a lot of love, which I guess, you know, in the generations earlier, there wasn't a lot of that. So you would keep I would keep my Mercedes thing because that was the car that I had as a child, say, and reminded me of who I was.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the G. Ravgani says, I have a lot of small things all over the house, mostly things of good memories value, nothing of monetary values at all. That's an interesting point. I mean, in your knowledge of this and yourself, you don't keep things for their monetary value or more for your memory value?
Not at all. I mean, monetary value, as I say, all these things behind me are probably chipped. So they're not worth anything. I mean, the Rembrandt I mentioned might be worth a little bit, but most of the things are kept because they tell a story. They tell a story to you. They are things that make you who you are and remind you of a moment in life when something happened. And you know, I suppose a lot of people perhaps part with the things that give them unhappy memories because they don't want to be reminded. But Yeah.
That's a good point. I'm going to now look around my house after this is finished, and I'm going to find out what gave me an unhappy memory, and I'm going to throw it away in honor of my conversation with you, Jane. But let's get back to your editing writing. So you decided after a number of books that you didn't like being published. Give us an idea of the books that you had published by these top authors, and then where you went to from there.
Yeah. Well, the British Library publication was because I was very much into you mentioned this at the beginning, I was very interested in electronic books and, well, basically the rights of authors in a digital age. We're coming across that again with, actors and ABBA and all that sort of thing, people whose identities are being stolen. And I thought that authors were under a lot of threat from the digital age. I'm talking about the 1990s here. So
you're talking about 30 odd years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
And you knew about this.
And I was doing something in association with Middlesex University and for the Society of Authors as well, on the relationship between authors and electronic devices, and published a report with the British Library. And at that same time, I was very involved in electronic things. So for those of you who've got Word, it's got a unit within it called, well, it was called Correct Grammar. It's not called that anymore. It's just part of Word. And I was responsible for the English translation of grammatical rules from the American. So Houghton Mifflin in America had published had set up this thing called Correct Grammar, but were very much aware of phrases that are different in English and needed an English editor. And that was a marvelous job. I absolutely loved it. But one of the downsides of that was that they said that they made me sign a thing when I took the job on, that I would throw away all my notes at the end of the project. And I did, and I'm sorry now, because I would like to look back on that, because it was a fascinating year.
Yes. And so why did they do that? Because it sounds a bit sort of for the British Library to sort of start burning notes. So
well, the British Library was a different job.
Oh,
the grammar thing was sort of just because I was working in two areas, the authors' rights and then the things that were going to help authors, like instant grammar correction.
Okay, that's Chris Barless says, remember Citizen Kane? Kane was massively acquisitive, but eventually it was the sled he had in his childhood that was the most important thing to him. Acquisition isn't all it's cracked up to be, perhaps, but I do love Jane's stuff. So the childhood sled, I'd forgotten about that. Yes, that you sort of cling on to it after you. So you were prescient because you actually had an idea of what Kindle and everything would do 20 years before it happened.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there's always a right time and a right place, isn't there? And I can remember once being at a conference where somebody said that, and that Marks and Spencer were the first company to bring out briefs instead of baggy knickers. And that was because the baggy knicker lady who had been in charge of the department had just left, and some bright young thing took on her job as buyer and was presented with these shoestring things and said yes, and they took off and everybody was delighted and happy and the world became different. And had this been presented when buyer knicker lady was in charge, it wouldn't have happened. And in the same way, I got involved with somebody who invented something called Genie. And we're talking about, are we talking about the 1990s or even earlier? I can't quite remember.
Yes.
And this was basically, his idea was the iPad, basically. It was going to be a computer for women that knew what the contents of your fridge were and would remind you what to buy and would do all sorts of wonderful things. Anyway, he was before his time, and he didn't get it off the ground. My role was something editorial. I can't bring that back to recall quite, but I would, if that had come out off the ground, I would be owning proper Rembrandts now.
You've got to go in there. And so you moved out of being published, many books there, and decided to self-publish, which is probably before anybody was self-publishing. Tell us how you did that.
Well, okay, here's the first one. A Life in 490 Recipes.
Right, which we're going to talk to. Give us the technical things of getting that out, and then I want to talk about the editorial content, because that's fascinating.
Well, as I said at the beginning, I started life as an editor at Longman's, art editor, in fact, first, and then I became a proper editor. So over quite a lot of years, because we're talking about 1970 something. No, yeah, afraid so. So there's been a lot of years since then. So I've seen a lot of books go through either as an editor or in lots of different ways. So I know how they're put together. I know how print works. So it wasn't a very big step to find a printer, teach myself in design and teach myself how to do layout, because I'd been all along.
And then in those days, how do you sell it?
Well, actually, this one I did for my 70th birthday, and so 490 was because it's divisible by 7. The number of pages is divisible by 7. It's got contributions from all my friends, which are divisible by 7. So are the illustrations. So I was playing games, which you can only do that if you publish it yourself. Okay. So this one was really in order to give away as my 70th birthday present to myself. So I gave it away. I did sell as well, and I think I was only after covering my costs, nothing more.
So tell us how you have a recipe and you equate that to a friendship or a relationship.
I asked all my friends to contribute, and they all gave me a recipe. I then divided that up into, well, I mean, here we have breads and pastries.
Okay.
Don't know whether that's coming.
Yes, we can see that. And those are your illustrations.
And bread being the staff of life, I said. And I'll quote, I say, the staff of life for me is friendship. I've been very lucky to have several close friendships, more than my fair share, perhaps. And one's capacity for new and meaningful friendships does not diminish with age, though inevitably long years of shared experience count particularly. And then, so I'm talking about the person who gave me the recipe and why we have a friendship, and anything inconsequential that comes of that.
And I guess this is going to be a dreadful question, so you do not need to answer it, but is there a favorite recipe in there that equates to a favorite friendship or relationship?
Well, because I know there are some people who are friends of mine online, so I should find them. No, there isn't. I love them all.
Perfect. I did. It's the only Goldster question I've asked that I've actually said somebody doesn't have to answer it unless we're talking to spies and we say they don't have to answer classified information. Emma wants to go off topic a bit, but that's fine, Emma, because I'm interested in that. Does hoarding apply to those who save money in banks but never spend it? They enjoy watching it grow. Is that an illness?
So we're talking about Midas. And
yes, we're talking about Misers, aren't we? Yes.
And King Midas.
Oh, Midas, yes.
Yes. Yeah, I could see that could come from the same root.
Yeah. It's wonderfully secure, isn't it? Because you have your collections, your sled from childhood, my Mercedes thing. It's the sort of security that you've got it, and money in the bank is your rain money, isn't it? If it's rainy day money.
But money in the bank, but not being used, not being spent is a shame. I mean, that brings me to my particular fondness is for glass. It's the other side of the dresser, so I can't show you any, but I've got some seriously nice 18th century glass, drinking glasses, and I don't think there's any point in having them unless you use them. So I blooming do, and some nice wine to go with it on occasion as well. So keeping glass on a shelf or in a cupboard might be a little bit like keeping money in the bank and not spending it.
Yes, and not spending it at all. Gita 7 is my lucky number, so that's your yes, sounds lovely for the book. Tracy, getting back to Emma's point of what we're discussing, it seems like a case of abundance versus scarcity.
Yeah.
Is that getting that balance, isn't it, between
well, I think I think one is one's own personality, because I mean my nephew lives in a house with white walls and perhaps one object on the mantelpiece, and a sort of Japanese approach to decor. And I think that's probably your personality showing itself. So
yeah,
I don't have one friend, I have as many as life gives me.
And the relationships go through, which brings us beautifully. I like these dovetails that we're doing here, Jane. into I mean, it's a bigger the egg and card book, which I think is a diary. Tell us about, show it to us, and then tell us about it.
Again, there's the cover. I think you're getting a bit of glint on that.
No, I'm seeing it fine.
Yeah, the egg is not quite the first one I did. Or is it? That's my husband anyway. He was a lute maker, and that's him playing the lute.
Oh, fantastic!
And then that's right at the beginning of our relationship. And then the Christmas card that year, because I did do an egg a year and a Christmas card a year, and they're themed to what went on in that particular year. So this is one of those ones where you open the pages, you can see in the middle there's a slit, and there's a joker in it, because this was a year where something went wrong, and I commented on it in that way. But this was, again, because we're book people here, I think we are. Can you see that's 2004?
Yes, I can see 4 eggs at the top there, and each have got a story in them. Yes.
The story of those was that was the year I had a Hawthornden Fellowship, which was, if anyone doesn't know about it, it was the marvellous castle in Scotland near Edinburgh, owned by the Hines family, and it was set up for writers to have a retreat. So you would have about 7. There were 7 of us the month I went, and we were there for a month. And just there to write, and all lunches were brought to you, and then you would assemble downstairs for supper in a castle. And the only thing we had to pay for was sherry before supper.
Oh, okay.
So that was that year. And the egg is the castle.
Oh, I see. Yes. And then you write. So you paint the card and the egg, and then you write a sort of description
the story of that. Yes.
And given all what we've been talking about, tell us a little bit about the lifespan of that, because you've lost loved ones, you've overcome huge obstacles. Share a bit of that with us, Jane.
Yeah, I mean, the recipe book for my 70th birthday, I was writing it as my husband was ill, and he died just before it was published. But he did see, I did have it on my iPad. I had the layout of it, and the night before he died, it's a nice memory, because my daughter sat with him and showed it to him and pushed the pages. So I feel that he did see it all, even though it wasn't a printed book. And he was the one I would have said, it can just as well be a paperback. But he was the one who said, no, we've got to be a hardback. And we, as I said, I showed you before about the bookbinding. We did these bookbinding classes together, but we were both very much into making things. That's sort of what made us both tick. And here is the version of it.
Oh my goodness!
Did as a bookbinding thing with a ribbon, and that's it's
beautiful
sign.
Open it up for us and show us the.
Well, it's the same. It's the same inside.
Yes.
It's the same.
But beautifully produced. Yeah.
But it's got end papers that we marbled ourselves. So that I think he did that one. So that's a tribute. It's a tribute to him.
And you said he was a lute maker. That's
a
fairly rare trade, isn't it?
Not as rare as you might think, but yes, he was one of the two best in the world. Sorry.
Oh goodness, yes, and I mean that's and when we the ups and downs of life and losing loved ones and that. How much does your illustration and the work that you've done around all this help it or hinder it or?
Yes, I think it's a great solace. For me, I'm never quite sure whether I'm a writer or an artist, and all my life I haven't been sure. My mother wanted me to go to art school. I wanted to go to university. Of course, I won. But I have wondered ever since whether she wasn't right. And if I didn't have those two things now to fall back on, I don't know whether life would be worth living, but I do have it, and I'm very fortunate.
Is that what we call a hinterland? Having, I mean, we were talking earlier, sorry, about stripping all the possessions and waiting to find out who you are. And when you strip all that away and the plates go and this goes and that goes, you are a writer and an artist wherever you would be in the world.
Yes, I would.
And you don't have to be one or the other, do you? Because you've shown that.
I think people prefer it if you're one or the other. I've found that it's been a disadvantage in life to, because people prefer to know who you are, and I don't know which one I am. So
I think that I have that problem as to whether I'm a journalist or an author.
Yeah.
So has anybody else got that, whether you're a gardener or a horse rider or whatever it is? just share that dilemma with us, because I think we all have this sort of thing. It's usually two, I think, isn't it? It's not, I'm going to be a motor car racing, a champagne salesman, or or a yachtsman. It's one of the other. Geeta says you're both, I think, referring to Stephen, you're both so talented. He'll be so proud of you. We have one. G. Revgani, what a sweet pleasure to listen to this lovely woman, so creative. I couldn't agree with you more on that. Jean Joyce, I think it's great that you're both an artist and an author, so stick with it. Maybe we can find a word that encompasses the two. And it's a bit like when you're published and the publisher, as you say, wants to put you into a genre so the booksellers know which shelf to put you on.
Yeah.
And G. Ravagni again says, interesting, never had money in the bank, just the necessary. Only now that I'm 80, I've got some money in the bank and I don't spend at all, only for the strictly necessary. I guess that's because of habit. If you haven't had it for much of your life, you're not going to start suddenly splurging, are you?
No. But can I mention something else, Humphrey, which is that one of the things I like doing now is mentoring other people through books that they want to write. And in a way, all the three books I showed you are a sort of memoir. I mean, disguised in various ways, but that's what they are. And I find that a lot of people do want to write about what has been their life. So can I just show you?
Oh, yes. This is your self-publishing mentorship.
Yeah,
that you
this is Wendy Max, who is a cello teacher and wrote a memoir. It took us about a year, and I did the layout and got it published for her and mentored her through it. We had a sort of system whereby she would send me a paragraph every Wednesday,
right? Maybe
more than a paragraph. Writing wasn't her absolute forte. I hope you're not one of the people watching, Wendy, but and so sometimes I would start a sentence and throw it over to her and say, finish the sentence. So, but there's a whole book.
And is it illustrated inside, or is it?
No, it's got photographs. It's all text.
Can you open it up and just show us a bit of, because Geeta's saying the cover is amazing, so I want to.
Yeah, well, it looks like this.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then there she is getting
and the nub of this is it's a memoir.
It's a memoir.
Yes.
And in a similar way, but not really a memoir at all, this one has just come out.
Okay.
This is Jewellery and Silverware, written by Vicky Ambrose Smith, about her own work. She's a jeweler and a silversmith.
Okay.
And again, I think this one took 2 years. Again, similar technique. So just to show you what that's like.
So Jane, when you say you mentor them and it's just come out, give us the process by which the first one I got it printed for her and she is selling it. The second one, the silverware book, went to a publisher called Unicorn, who I think it's called Subvention Publishing now. They charge quite a bit of money, but they did all the layout and they've got warehousing and sales potential, etc. And she says that she's recouped what she spent on it. Okay. It's not been out a year yet, but she's recouped it in getting commissions that she wouldn't otherwise have got. Okay. But again, it took 2 years of her sending me something once a week, and I would interact with it. And you used your expertise and long history in that of actually getting it to fruition, which they would never have had.
Well, I think they would both say they couldn't have done it otherwise, because they needed it drawn out of them. You know, that everyone's got a book in them, but they can't necessarily get it onto the page.
Yes. Yes, it's because since you first were so prescient about self-publishing, and now we have electronic books everywhere, there are hundreds of thousands of books being published each year. How would you place the two that you've shown us so that they've got a unique selling point, as it were?
Well, they've both got a limited audience that the authors, would know. You know, so you know, you don't need a sort of regular publisher if you know your field so well that you've got the outlets to get the book to them.
Yes. And can Goldster members, if they have a book in them, can they get in touch with you for advice, or do you have mail up to here?
I've got 3 at the moment. One's on. He's writing about architectural artifice. I've got someone who's doing a book on the ginger plant, which is absolutely fascinating, and 2 authors who are writing about the Pestalozzi school initiative. Pestalozzi. It's a Swiss. It's a bit like Montessori. Well, that's the nearest I can get. It's not really, but a bit like that in ethics. But yes, no, I would be delighted. I'm always interested. It's what I do now, and
well, this is if you just Google Jane Dorner editor, I'll tell everybody the website comes up. We have got the email address in the chat, which we'll put up again. So if anybody wants to get in touch with Jane. Brenda says, Jane, you are an absolute treasure. So happy to have you've chosen to share some of your pleasures with us today. A true creative. Happy times, and thank you so much. And Denise, you have gifts that you can share. Incredible. You are an artist when you paint and an author when you write. We are all multi-dimensional. I'm going to say, next time somebody says, what are you, Humphrey? I'm going to say, I'm multi-dimensional.
Good.
Peter looks good. G. Ravagni, who's been a great contributor on the show. I love writing and painting and don't know what I love more. Yes, I think that's... that is a thing, because you have not yet decided, have you? Or you will never decide, will you? Whether you're but you're also a brilliant cook.
Well.
is that a hinterland?
I think it's just part of the same creativity, isn't it? Just
yes, it is.
So.
But it's interesting that all the stuff that we're seeing behind you, that stuff of life that you write about, is actually connecting ourselves with who we are.
Yeah, I would say so.
Like
Citizen Kane. Well, yeah, I mean, he had more money than it was good for him, didn't he? But yeah, I mean, I think, as you come towards sort of latter part of one's years, you need to account for yourself. And these are the ways I've looked at doing that.
But with the discipline of throwing away, say, the passports, I think you did. Jen, I want you to sit there for a couple of seconds, because I have to tell everybody what is coming up, and then we're going to come back to you for a few more tips of advice and stories. June 9th, which I think is tomorrow, because today is June 8th. I'm with John Hands and his fantastically ambitious The Future of Humankind. Where are we all heading? And is it as bad or as good as we think? And how much do we throw away? I will be asking John Hands, or keep, as we head there. June 15th, Lucinda is with Gerald Dickens, the great-great-grandson of the author Charles Dickens, with his new book, Dickens and Staplehurst, the biography of a rail crash. That's the story behind an 1885 rail disaster. Lucinda is the great-great-great-granddaughter of Dickens, so there'll be some family stuff there if you want to tune into family relationships as well. June 16th, Lucinda is with the novelist Amanda Craig with her latest book, The Three Graces, which is about 3 friends in their 80s. They've retired to Tuscany, and they must stop one grandchild from a disaster wedding, redeem another, and save a life, and all the stuff that goes on there. And then June 20th is our next Riverstone live in-person event, which some of you may have been to. I'm with Dr. Saliha Mahmood Ahmed. Her new bestseller is The Kitchen Prescription, which draws on her love of good food and her expertise in gut health to create recipes that are easy to make, incredibly delicious to eat, and will effortlessly keep our digestion in tip-top condition. So this is a live in-person event where we have coffee, we have drinks. The show is at 12 o'clock, but you can come early and you can stay on. So come and join for coffee, wine, snacks. And after that, Riverstone are going to have Saliha demonstrate some of the dishes after the show. I think that's going to be at 2 o'clock that afternoon. A concierge at goldster.co.uk or Joe Carter Hawkins at goldster.co.uk, the email that you might have. Jane, are you free on the 20th? You fancy a bit of...
Yeah, well, at noon, yes, that would be lovely. I've got one of her books, as a matter of fact.
Have you really? Is she any good? Is she any good?
Fantastic, yes.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So we'll get the information to you. It's in Fulham. You're in London, aren't you? So it's in Fulham, and come early, and then some of the guests, the audience here, if they're in London that want to come along, meet Jane and meet Saliha. We can have a great Goldster noon. That's brilliant. Do you have a favorite dish in your whole life of what you like eating or cooking?
Me, well, in that book, she's got fabulous recipes for using aubergines, and I'm rather keen on the aubergines. So let's go with that for the moment.
And how is your favorite way to cook an aubergine?
I think just halve it, put it in the oven with a bit of olive oil until it goes soft, scoop out the center, mix that with some caramelized onions, put it back into the case that it came in, bit of feta maybe, something like that, maybe an egg, breadcrumbs, put it back into the oven. Perfect.
My goodness, that was incredibly detailed. Did we all get that? We've got a recording of it anyways. So that is going to be fantastic. Now, the final question, which I ask all my guests, because Goldster looks at us all living healthy, active, positive lives for as long as we can. You've been through the rough and tumble of life, and your ambitions, your successes, failures, all that sort of thing. What is your tip, Jane, for getting out of bed in the morning and keeping going?
Well, you've got to have a project. That's the only thing that gets me up, is if I've got usually a writing project. I'm doing a book on picnics themed on operas at the moment, and that's what's exciting me. So I'm reading opera librettos and finding clues as to what would be a menu to go with that particular opera.
Oh, so hold on a second. I've got 30 seconds to ask this question for you to answer. Picnics themed operas. Now, this reminds me of, is it Glyndebourne, where you have your picnic there, or Holland Park, which is near me, where
absolutely. And so we know what wine Don Giovanni had. We know that he had pheasant on his table in the last act. We know that he had sorbetti and confetti for his wedding guests, and so I'm playing with that, and with all the big operas as well.
And you're going to be illustrating it as well?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. When are you likely to have that for us to see?
I don't know, but that the answer to your question is, have something like that in your life, and then the days are enjoyable.
Okay, and sorry, I'm going to go over time, but sorry, quick question. Do you eat the skin of the aubergine in the recipe you mentioned?
Yes.
You do? You eat the skin thing. There?
Yes, the skin becomes a little boat to hold the filling.
Okay, and I'm about to put into the chat, before we sign off, your email and website, because we're getting a lot of things in there of people that want to get in hold of you. A lot of messages in there, but we are. Time's winged chariot is upon us. What a wonderful roller coaster conversation we've had, Jane, from banking to this and that. I'm going to have a spring in my step for the rest of the day. The email of those who don't get it, jane@editor.net. You must have got that very early. There'd be 100 people that would want that. That shows your prescience. Thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here, enjoying Jane's fun, the wit, the stories. Until tomorrow with John Hands and the future of humankind. Stay curious, stay involved, stay active, stay safe, and of course, stay Goldster. Thank you, the fabulous Jane Dorner, for bringing us such an uplifting color to your stuff of life. Thank you, Jane. Bye.
Bye.